Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 94.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 94 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/94. Today's sponsor is giftforgunnuts.com. Giftforgunnuts.com, where you can get daily updates on gift ideas for the hunting and shooting sports enthusiast on your holiday shopping list from now until Christmas. Giftforgunnuts.com. And today's guest is Doug Ritter from kniferights.org. He is the founder, chairman, and CEO, and now here's Doug.
Doug Ritter, welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be here, James.
Great. So, Doug, you're the founder of Knife Rights. Would you tell us a little about that organization?
Sure. The briefest explanation I've been able to put together is essentially Knife Rights is the NRA for knife owners. We are the second front in the defense of the Second Amendment. We've been active legislatively for the last 8 years, getting rid of knife bans in 21 states, passing 29 bills, defeating 8 bills in 6 states, and we have a federal civil rights lawsuit going on for the last 7 years against New York City and District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr.
Wow. Yeah, that New York City, I remember reading at one point they arrested an Eagle Scout, or was working on an Eagle Scout. He was there volunteering to help the homeless or some very, nice thing, and he had a 1-inch pocket knife, and they arrested him for it.
Yeah, they have, that's only one of tens of thousands of people in New York City that have been arrested for carrying common pocket knives, the same pocket knives we carry everywhere else in the United States without any issue. I mean, we're talking well over 60,000 people in the last decade or so, continuing to arrest people at the rate of 400 to 500 people per month. And, bear in mind, this is not like a parking ticket. This is a misdemeanor with a potential year in jail with a virtually automatic upgrade to felony if you have a prior, even if that prior is 20 or 30 years ago. So it's a big deal. And as gun owners, if you're a gun owner in New York City where you need government's permission and all that, your arrest, not your conviction, but your arrest means that within 24 hours you have to turn in your guns or they come knocking on your door.
Wow. Crazy. And that's something I've talked to a few people about, how we look at the Constitution and, and we think we're protected, but that it's not self-enforcing. That, you even said you've been working on this for 7 years, and, as blatant a violation of the Second Amendment as this is, you'd think that this would be real quick, in and out, they get in trouble and everyone lives happily ever after. But
I'm not sure anyone lives happily ever after in New York or New Jersey or California, or some of these other states that have draconian gun and knife laws, and it's an issue. I live in Arizona where I don't have to worry about that stuff. But I feel bad for folks who a friend suggested it was the salt water, since we seem to have the most problems in states bordering the ocean. But it's terrible. I mean, New York City is particularly gross and disgusting in this regard. Beyond the fact that all these tens of thousands of people have been arrested, Legal Aid Society did some research, and over 80% of the persons arrested for carrying a pocket knife are persons of color, even in white majority neighborhoods. So it's not just bad for Second Amendment supporters; it's bad for everybody, and it's discriminatory and it's biased, and that's the reason we fight this. New York. Trust me when I tell you that a lot of our membership has questioned why we are spending so much time and effort in New York, because to a certain extent they look at it and say, hey, they voted for those people. But you can't just take the easy battles. That's not how you win back your rights and correct wrongs. You have to work hard even when it's not easy. You can't walk away from the difficult battles. We're now looking at this case, federal case in New York, has now gotten to the point where we're looking at taking it to the Supreme Court, because that's the next step. That's a huge step for a small organization like us. But the alternative is letting Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, DA Vance get away with this terribly discriminatory behavior against knife owners.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you talked about some, it was an incredible list of successes that you've had there. So you've gotten laws changed in 21 states. How'd you do that? As a gun rights advocate, like, if we get one gun law changed, it's like a lifetime accomplishment, and you've done it 21 times. How'd you manage it?
Well, we've actually done it 29 times.
Oh, 29. Okay.
In 21 states. One of the unique things about the knife rights and our efforts to get rid of knife bans is they're not guns. And as a result of that, we get very, very strong bipartisan support for our bills. I mean, we have NRA F-rated Democrats sponsoring some of our bills. That's not unusual. We have Democratic governors signing our bills. In New York State, where we have this big lawsuit, we've tried a number of times to fix the problem legislatively. And we've twice passed bills through the New York legislature, both overwhelmingly. In 2017, there was only one nay vote in each house. You can't get a whole lot more overwhelming than that. And the governor vetoed the bills. But it's testament to the significant bipartisan support we get. For folks on our side of the aisle, so to speak, this is a freedom issue. It's a Second Amendment issue. It's about our rights. For the other side of the aisle, this is a classic criminal justice reform issue. And just as we see in New York, we see elsewhere that, persons of color, their constituents, oftentimes, these are the folks that are getting arrested most often for simply carrying a knife that, is too long, got the wrong name, opens the wrong way, stupid little things that don't impact anything with people that have no intent to commit a crime with this tool. These are tools. These are tools carried by millions of Americans every day at home, at work, recreating. But every once in a while, they're also an arm, and they're used to defend someone or someone's loved ones. I do remind our folks in the gun community that the Second Amendment doesn't say firearms; it says arms.
Right.
And knives can certainly be arms.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of times they're the better choice. And I think that's something people won't realize. Even in states where you have fairly friendly firearms carry laws, you can still be arrested for having having a knife that's the wrong size or the wrong mechanics, and then and then there goes your carry permit. Now all of a sudden you have a gun while committing a crime, and all of those all of those extra laws come into play.
That's certainly true. I mean, it's one reason why we we work so hard to get rid of these irrational laws. We see laws against automatic opening knives, switchblades, ballet songs, daggers and Bowie knives and things like that. And they're just tools. And for example, a switchblade doesn't open any quicker than a one-hand opening knife, and certainly no quicker than a fixed blade knife. So having a law against them is ridiculous. We've repealed 16 switchblade bans in states. 44 states now allow automatic knives to 1 degree or another. 33 states allow everyday carry of automatic knives. This year we celebrated Switchblade Freedom Day in Louisiana on August 1st. And we're continuing to roll back these irrational laws. And when we go talk to legislators, again, because they're not guns, we get a much more open reception. We demonstrate to them with trainers that there's no difference, and they're like, yeah, this is stupid. Let's fix this. And we get all this bipartisan support. I mean, the arguments aren't particularly different than with the gun rights issues, but the attitude towards them is very different.
Right. And do we know what the origin of all these odd laws were? I mean, in my imagination, it was just, different forms of racism and bigotry, and people got scared, and so they banned one form of knife or another. Am I right in my guess, or do we?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, most of the long-standing laws against Bowie knives and long knives and daggers and that sort of thing came about after the Civil War. Many of the freed blacks could not afford firearms, or they'd been banned from owning, and so they turned to large knives for self-defense. And so the powers that be at the time banned the carry and oftentimes the possession of those knives. And then in the 1950s, where we got the switchblade bans, those came about in large part because of Hollywood and the demonization of switchblades as a weapon of gangs, often of gangs of persons of color. And a lot of that was indeed racism and bigotry as well. So it has a certainly an unsavory history in terms of why we have these laws in place. And again, that's one of the things we bring out when we talk to legislators, is that these didn't make any sense. They were the product oftentimes of racism, and we need to get rid of them.
So what are, obviously New York City is one, but what are some of the other really tough states that you haven't been able to crack yet?
Well, in terms of, for example, switchblade bans, there's 6 states that still have total bans on switchblades. New Jersey, New Jersey, Maryland, Hawaii, New Mexico, Washington, and I'm missing one there. Surprisingly, New York allows switchblades if you're hunting or fishing. California allows switchblades and the carry of switchblades as long as they're under 2 inches in blade length. But New Jersey, as an example, not only bans switchblades, but bans numerous other knives. And in New Jersey, all of those are felonies. It's the only state where knife possession laws are felonies right out of that.
Oh, huh. I didn't realize that. So in all the other states, possession of any type of knife is only a misdemeanor?
A misdemeanor, or in some states, violations. Not even technically criminal. Just depends. And then, unlike firearms laws where we have preemption in all but 1 or 2 states, a number of 10 of the states where we've passed bills, we've included or passed a bill that was a knife law preemption bill. So the knife laws are the same throughout the state. You don't have a situation like you have in a lot of states where you might have good knife laws at the state level, but you have individual cities that have their own restrictions. I mean, for example, in Colorado, we got rid of their ban on switchblades last year, but because there's no preemption, you can't carry a switchblade in Denver and, a number of other cities and towns in Colorado. So preemption is an important part of what we're doing. I mean, we're really following a road that's already been gone down with firearms laws. There's no reason that the laws shouldn't be the same throughout the state. You shouldn't have to worry about crossing a city or county line and your suddenly legal knife becomes illegal because, you drove down the road.
Right. Yeah. So what inspired you to start this organization?
Well, it all goes back to an article that ran in the Wall Street Journal in the summer of 2006. It was on the headline, top of the page in the B section, and it was an article about tactical knives. It was pretty much like every really bad article you've ever read about, evil assault weapons and all that kind of stuff. It just substitute tactical knives. And it was filled with misrepresentations and bogus theories, and just it was terrible. And I had traveled overseas in Europe. I knew how bad their knife laws had become, and I had, I guess you might call it, an epiphany. And the epiphany was that there really was no grassroots knife owners organization that was going to proactively do some knife laws. The only places that any knife legislation had been done was by the industry organization that acted reactively when something bad happened. But there was nobody going around getting rid of knife laws. And when I started Knife Rights in December of 2006, I mean, quite frankly, the vast majority of folks in the knife community thought I was nuts. And they may have been right, but, they told me you would never get rid of a switchblade ban, that there was no way to get rid of knife bans and restrictions. But we have. I'm happy to prove those naysayers wrong. We work very hard. We're aggressive. We've got a good story to tell. And we're not guns. It just makes a world of difference.
Yeah. And I'm sort of still amazed at how much you've been able to accomplish in, I guess it's 12 years now, but that's, wow, 29 laws removed. What a wonderful thing. So is there a state that is like super friendly for knife people if they made that so important that they wanted to move?
There's actually quite a few states where that is the case. Certainly, my own state of Arizona is great. I mean, there are no illegal knives in Arizona. If you want to walk down the street with a Bowie knife or a sword or stick it down your pants or whatever, you're perfectly free to do it. Kansas, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Tennessee, New Hampshire, Alaska, all have no illegal knives and have passed preemption. So, those are states where, from a knife point of view, as long as you're not using it to commit an illegal act, you're perfectly free to carry whatever kind of knife you want.
Wow. And carry them concealed or open and all of that?
Yep.
Wow.
No restrictions whatsoever.
Wonderful.
And surprisingly to some people, blood does not run in the street as a result of getting rid of these knife laws.
Right. Yeah, which, just like with guns, that's what everyone's always afraid is going to happen. So I always ask my guests if there are books that they recommend that all gun owners read, either about politics or history or firearms or knives. Any come to mind?
Not really. I mean, there's a few books on knife laws that allow people to figure out what's legal and what's not legal. There's and Knife Rights has a app that you can download called the Legal Blade, which lists all the knife laws of the 50 states and the District of Columbia and about 40 major cities. But they're unlike firearms and the Second Amendment fight. You're not going to see a bunch of books about that because basically there hasn't been one until we got started. There's a article which is available off our website that many will find interesting. It's called Knives and the Second Amendment by David Koppel and a couple other Second Amendment authorities, which makes for interesting reading. Goes into the history of the knife laws and why they are covered by the Second Amendment. Knives were mentioned in both the Heller and McDonald opinions or decisions from the Supreme Court. This really is the same fight. It's just a different front in the bigger battle for our Second Amendment rights.
And how can people help you guys? How can they find you online? How can they support the cause? Stuff like that.
Well, there's a couple things going on. First of all, the website is kniferights.org. That's kniferights.org. Right now, we have a couple of things going on where your listeners can be very helpful. One is we have a bill in Congress called the Knife Owners Protection Act, which is similar to the Firearms Owners Protection Act, but with all the holes that have been shot through the Firearms Owners Protection Act covered. And it also includes the repeal of the Federal Switchblade Act, which, just as an aside, only covers interstate commerce, or mostly covers interstate commerce. Once automatic knives are legally within the state borders, it's the state laws that control it for the most part. If they go to the website on the right side, they can click on the repeal the Federal Switchblade Act and protect knife owners, and they'll get an opportunity to send a email to their senator and their congressman or congresswoman. So we're looking for co-sponsors for that bill. And they will also be able to send an email to senators opposing another bad bill that's in the Senate that purports to do the same thing, does not include the repeal of the Federal Switchblade Act. And in terms of the Second Amendment, folks that are listening to your podcast, all you need to know about that bill is that Senator Feinstein doesn't oppose it. And that should tell you how bad a bill it is.
Wow. Okay.
And then we certainly would welcome new members or donations. You go to the website. There's places you can join and places you can donate. We have the foundation does all the legal work. Right now, we're raising money for the Supreme Court case, so we would certainly welcome folks' help. And I should note that the case that we will take to the Supreme Court is not a Second Amendment case; it's a vagueness case, because that's how we were fighting it in New York. Because, well, it's the Second Circuit. We may have had a chance with vagueness, but we certainly wouldn't have had a chance with a 2A claim. But what I think is interesting for folks is if we're successful at the Supreme Court, a decision in our favor would also benefit the Second Amendment community, and we're expecting to have amici from across the range of the political spectrum. Just as the NRA got an amici from the ACLU in their lawsuit against New York State, we anticipate support for our Supreme Court case from the same folks who supported our efforts in New York State, which included the NRA, ACLU, NAACP, and a whole raft of alphabet organizations of all political stripes.
Yeah, and just looking at you mentioned raising money, and just so people understand, is your experience in taking this case to the Supreme Court similar to what I've heard with the Heller and McDonald cases, that the legal bills run upwards of $1 million to get the cases heard? And
it won't be quite that much, but it will be a lot of money for a small organization like us to raise. A lot of money. I mean, going to the Supreme Court is not inexpensive, even as a nonprofit, even with help from folks. It's a very expensive proposition, and the odds against your case being heard are not great. I mean, like 6% professionally prepared writs of centori are actually granted by the Supreme Court. In other words, you make an application to the Supreme Court. You're petitioning them to hear your case, and there are a lot of elements that go into why they hear cases, and then if you're selected, then you have to argue the merits of the constitutional issue that you've raised. It's a time-consuming and very expensive proposition. I don't think we'll spend $1 million.
Okay.
I certainly hope not, because we don't have that. But for an organization of our size, it's going to be a huge bill. I mean, we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the 7 years we've been fighting this case in federal court in New York. So, the choice is raise the money and go to the Supreme Court and hope that the constitutional issues you've raised are important enough for the court to hear your case, and we think we have a good chance of doing that, or we wouldn't bother, or give up and let New York win.
Right.
And one of the reasons that we have been as successful as we have is we don't give up. I mean, there have been a number of states where it's taken 2 or 3 or 4 years to get bills passed. There have been a number of states. I mean, Texas is a perfect example, where we have gone back time and time and time again to get things done. Many people don't realize it, but until last year when we got our bill passed, it was illegal to carry a Bowie knife in Texas. I mean, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not illegal anymore.
Oh, good. So I remember...
That took 6 years. 6 long years.
So how many people do you have, working on this nationwide?
It's myself, my lobbyist, and my wife.
Oh, wow. That's even more amazing that you get all that done. Amazing. All right.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have a good membership base. I don't release our membership numbers for a bunch of reasons, but in terms of actually getting work done, it's a very, very, very small organization. We watch our pennies, but we work really, really hard at this. And we could definitely use your listeners' support.
Absolutely.
Every penny counts. Every penny goes to the fight.
Great. Well, I will make sure I post links to these on the show notes page. And I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Please help us fight the Second Front in the defense of the Second Amendment. Please go to kniferights.org and help us win.
Right. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
My pleasure. You guys all take care.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 94 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/94. Please remember to check out our sponsor, giftforgunnuts.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.